Intelligence Committee member and former Trump campaign national security advisor, David Tafuri, a former State Department official under President Obama. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have both of you here. David, let me start with you. Are we getting mixed messages out of the administration on this?
We definitely are getting mixed messages. As you mentioned, Secretary of State Tillerson certified to Congress this week that Iran is complying with the deal. On the other hand, President Trump says that Iran is not complying with the spirit of the deal. There's a slight difference there, but it's still got to be very confusing for Iran and for those who are watching this. We ought to be honest and pragmatic about this. The deal wasn't as good as it should have been when we signed the deal in 2015, but we're somewhat boxed in. Iran has stepped back its ambitions to develop nuclear weapons, and it is complying in that sense with the agreement. Also, we have given up many of the things that Iran wanted when it bargained for this agreement. We've given them money that was sanctioned. We've eased sanctions on them. And there are other countries that are parties to this agreement. So we have to take a pragmatic approach, keep the agreement in place, and try to find other ways to curb Iran's influence in the region and the ways that Iran is supporting terrorism and fomenting instability across the region.
And they're doing that all over. I mean, they're supportive of the Assad regime, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, perhaps North Korea as well in many instances. So, Pete Hoekstra, one of the things that people were so critical about in this deal was that it didn't press for behavior modification of Iran before there was an agreement in place. And now aren't we sort of reaping the complications of that?
Oh, that's exactly right, Martha. As you pointed out, number one, they are emboldened, and importantly, they are an enriched Iran with all the money that has come in, that has flowed into Iran with the lessening of sanctions and those types of things. You know, number one, Tillerson did certify that technically Iran is meeting the requirements of the deal. But as the president pointed out, it's not confusing at all. It's very clear. They're not living into the spirit. The spirit of the agreement that was laid out by the Obama administration is if we get this agreement with Iran, we're going to see a change in behavior. We're going to see Iran become a stabilizing force in the Middle East. And everything but that has happened. Syria, Yemen, it's disaster. The most important thing is, though, is they are a close ally of North Korea. What type of support are they providing to North Korea as the United States and China might be trying to put the screws to the North Korean regime?
Yeah, I mean, the idea was that they wanted to sort of change their place in the world to some extent, and that they were willing to curb their nuclear ambitions in order to get that in exchange, David. And we've seen absolutely no evidence of that. And isn't that the bigger issue here?
Well, I disagree with Congressman Hoekstra in a couple of different ways. First of all, this is confusing. Remember that President Trump said during the campaign that he was going to rip up the Iran deal on day one. That hasn't happened, and he ought to be honest about that. And Secretary Tillerson's certification to Congress shows that he doesn't intend to do that, and he's not going to do that, and he's broken that campaign promise. So he ought to be honest about that. Second of all, nobody at the time the Iran deal was put in place thought that Iran was going to become a positive force or a stabilizing force in the Middle East. Nobody thought that. We knew at that time when we signed the agreement, and again, I didn't support the agreement at the time, but we knew we were just getting Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions and normalizing relations to a certain extent. We also understood that Iran was going to continue to do the things that it's doing in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen, as you mentioned, Martha, which are not in the U.S. interest. And we have to find other ways to curb Iran's influence and confront Iran, which the last administration was trying to do. And this administration, I hope, will do it in an even more robust way.
All right. Pete and David, thank you very much, you guys. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.